Spoken about how, well, the old joke that your scope 3 is everyone else's scope 3 and we can't do this without collaboration. Everyone talks a lot about collaboration, so we're going to talk about some like tangible practicalities of what that means in a pre-competitive world and space as well, and some real examples. Evie, I know you've been transforming like radical partnerships, and that's something that you talk about, and transformational change with those, so we'll go into those. But I'll kick us off with Fran, from your perspective. What are the key considerations when we need to think about when it comes to industry collaboration? Oh, you've got CBC.
Super. Hello. So yeah, I think it's easy in collaboration when we think about it to go straight to external, and I think that needs to be the focus today. But also there's an element of, how do you do internal collaboration well as well? So I'll start there. But I think trust has been mentioned a couple of times today, and I think getting the business to trust you in your role, if you're in sustainability, or trust the sustainability function, that we will try and make it as easy for them as possible. We will help them to upskill. And I think, a big thing about getting their collaboration for me is, how do I make sure that they understand the topic or the ask before I ask them to do the thing? Because it's hard to engage them if I just say, hey, I know I haven't spoken to you in, I don't know, it was this time last year I asked you for this annual data and I haven't spoken to you since. And, so it's how do you, not saying that's the case, but how do you make sure that you invest time in helping them to understand the ask before you ask them for the data? But also, kind of in an external lens is, how do we think about the right partner? And by that I mean kind of, are they committed? Are they equally as committed to the task as you are? And it might be a kind of, thought about that in two ways. It's like the set piece, I'm going to call it the set piece partner. So it's kind of the third parties that you do your annual report with, that you do your carbon with, that you do your soy with potentially, and they're specialists, and it's kind of comparing apples with apples, right? It's like, well, these are the partners we can do carbon with, who and it's almost like word on the street, right? Like, what does everyone say about 3Q, or what does everyone say about Old Cheesesteak? So that's slightly different to value chain collaboration, and for me, a big focus at the moment is how are we going to collaborate with customers, but also with our supply base. And are they committed to multiple levels of leadership? So it's not just, are the sustainability team clued up and into this, but do their leaders get this, and are they committed to it? And when times get tough, i.e. UK&I raw, i.e. inflation, are they going to want to carry on with the project? Are they going to be consistent in their commitment? Because, we all know we're all stretched for resource, right? So we want to be smart about where we're spending our time. So I think that's a big element. And then also, once you've got that partner, how are we going to learn together? Because I think this idea of upskilling together is so important. So what we're trying to do with our customers on sustainable diets is say, hey guys, like, this is a new topic for us. We're getting a handle on this. So are you. Can we get our teams in the same room, right? So we've proposed this to a key customer, to say, we want to get what we're calling our frontline teams, so our sales guys, our product teams. Let's get the cross-functional frontline teams in the room and upskill them together. Let's have a joint training day, right? It's like shock horror, like no one you'd never do that on anything else. So there's all these ways in which we need to make sure that our teams are hearing the consistent message, because it's no point us upskilling our teams and then, a retailer upskilling their teams and God knows who knows what, right? So, it's not something we've done yet, but it's absolutely something that we're going to push for. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I'll pass on to Emma. And what are some of the opportunities collaboration can provide?
I used to play a game with my team. I was like, if you hear, what's the one thing we all need? Collaboration. I was like, you play bullshit bingo right there, because it really is that overused phrase for under-implemented activity. So we hear it all the time. I think really when it works is when we're coming together to solve a genuine problem that we both have, or to realise an opportunity that's out there. And there's safety in collaboration because you can split the risk. You share that risk between you, especially if we're trying to collaborate to do something new or groundbreaking. You can share the cost and the burden that it comes with. This is doing something game-changing. It costs money to do that. And of course, you bring together your resources, your different expertise, your different diverse employees, your different ways of thinking. So when you get that right, it can be amazing. So I'll share a couple of examples, and I'll give them as a bit of a shit sandwich, because the middle one is a failed collaboration. But I think we can almost learn more sometimes from when we've failed in collaboration. But one of the first ones really is we collaborated with one of our biggest competitors in coffee. And never would we normally be see dead in the same room with our biggest competitor on coffee. But we both recognised we had a pod problem. We were chucking out millions of pods onto the market for consumers to make lovely coffees at home. The amount of plastic and the amount of spent coffee that was just being out on the market was just crazy. So coming together saying, right, we have this challenge, what can we do? We invested together in a scheme called Podback, where it's been a huge undertaking. It's still costing us money. It's only now starting to pay back 3, 4, 5 years down the line. But it's amazing. We're getting back the pods. We're repurposing them, creating them into new materials. And even more so, we're getting back that spent coffee, which we can now turn into fertilizer to start applying on our farms and delivering more regenerative agriculture. So it's a really nice way of coming together with your competitors. So I think the key thing we learned from that one was don't get the legal risk of sitting with your peers and competitors get in the way of a good collaboration. The second one I'll highlight is we collaborated with a retailer, with Morrison's, to invest in a new recycling plant in Scotland that would collect flexible plastics, so your crisp packets, your Kit Kat wrappers, your pet food pouches, whatever, because that isn't collected, as we all know. Invested millions of pounds into this infrastructure. We even got then the construction industry on board, who this material was going to be chemically recycled into an eco material that could be used in building. Really, really exciting collaboration, unusual bedfellows coming together, but it failed. We lost lots of money along the way, we got a lot of learnings, but it didn't work. And the reason was we were missing a key partner, and that was the local authority who was doing that collection of getting enough material into the site. So the reason it failed is the site wasn't able to operate at the capacity that it was built for. So sometimes collaboration, you might miss a key partner along the way, or a key partner over-promises what they're going to deliver. So there's a lot of due diligence needed. And then the third one I want to mention, because there's been lots of talk about regenerative agriculture today, is we're collaborating at landscape scale through something called the Landscape Enterprise Network. And this is about taking a landscape and saying who has got a vested interest in that landscape. So that's us trying to buy the wheat in East Anglia. That's Anglian Water, who are trying to procure clean water to households in the region. That will be Northamptonshire County Council that want flood-resilient land, that want land they can bring their people for recreation. Lots of different actors. And then who's on that land? Who can deliver what we're asking of them? The farmers and the landowners. So by bringing these demand actors together and then collaborating with the supply actors, the farmers and the landholders, we can create a marketplace to say, okay, we want wheat, we want resilient land, we want carbon, we want biodiversity, and we can collectively pay the farmers and landowners to do that. So it's a really nice way of collaborating beyond our sector and bringing together unusual partners. So lots of lessons in each of them, but you can also learn from failure as well.
It's a great segue into ZV. So like you've been involved in some really high profile joint ventures. Share your experience.
So I think weather created quite some dramaturgy. Emma stole two thunders, so it's a perfect setting. I think in terms of partnership, there are 2 or 3 interesting conditions. One is around the need, but also creating seemingly impossible targets. If we go back to an example of Unilever's Sustainable Living Plan back 2010, creating waste-free operations felt impossible at the moment. But then you realize that when you start partnering at the local scale, you actually find out your waste from the factory is your future revenue. And from something which was impossible at the start, the waste-free operations globally was one of the first achieved targets. So that's one area where seemingly impossible targets triggers a mobilization. The second one, it's actually creating positive crisis. There is nothing better, because when you have your crisis procedures in the companies, usually they are meant to deliver most efficient decision making. So actually creating the sense of positive crisis unlocks really positive behaviors and very efficient mechanisms. An example of it is we as Unilever worked on the PLA, biodegradable material for tea bags, since 2008, lots of experiment, etc. Actually, David Attenborough and the big scale kind of publicity created so much pressure at some point back in 2018 that trigger actions were suddenly 10 years worth of errors translated in 10 weeks worth of mobilization and taking some extra risk. And you might have seen splitting tea bags in PG Tips at some point. From time to time we accept this was the cost of it, but it was a massive transition to 7 billion of biodegradable tea bags using true partnership, because that actually required us to work with NatureWorks, with Trevira, with Gradfelter, so it was the whole value chain system and a couple of universities involved to solve a pressing problem, create a solution. And just adding on the landscape approach, I can only second that, because this is really where the future should be. An example from this area, again, the positive crisis in a way, East Africa, Mau Forest, a lot of deforestation happening through local communities, and suddenly the rainfall is disrupted, and suddenly all the farmers see that potentially there is a risk to revenue. What happens, IDH, a huge compliment to this organization, pulls together all the actors in the landscape, creating the partnership, restoring 60,000 hectares of land, and actually creating additional revenue, and in the future capitalizing on the natural capital growth, which will be in the area. But let me finish on a really inspiring conversation about altruist IQ, because I think that's a little bit an essence of going into partnerships with a sense of positive crisis, with a sense of impossible mission. We always need to believe that there is a value creation for all, and there is almost nothing to lose. And rationally, there is genuinely nothing to lose most of the time. And I really, through our conversation yesterday, that made me think, what an amazing name for the business proposition. But it takes me finally to the point where I think the biggest partnership opportunity, the next thing, the next big, seemingly impossible goal is to remove carbon emission from the food system. It's a business opportunity of 700 billion euros if you convert it into carbon pricing, so there is definitely a big treasure. And the biggest unlock within that is data, intelligence of the food system, which currently does not exist, because we can only achieve this type of goal if we standardize and share the data. So there may be a bit of a humble beginning right here, how to inspire the thinking.
Thanks, Evie. I was going to go back to a pessimist question, but I think we should leave it on that positive note rather than me going back into the challenges, and leave that for all of you to dive into. But open it up to the floor. Q&A. Any questions we've got for the panelists? Oh, you've all been so vocal before. Oh, two at the same time. Okay, I'll go to Dan.
Thanks. The landscape kind of approach sounds amazing. I think, especially because you're taking really different benefits and then unlocking that by bringing the people together. So I was wondering, how do you identify the right people, the people that you want to bring in who have maybe very different benefits to the ones that you're caring about? Especially when I suppose there could be the risk that they would not want to cough up the money because they could just benefit from it anyway.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we've learned a huge amount, and my ex-colleague from Nestlé, from now at Diageo, can talk a lot about this. But I guess it's been really interesting watching. So we want low carbon wheat, right? We want to be able to procure wheat that for our cereal products or our pet food products that is lower carbon. Anglian Water want to save money on having to clean water that's got agricultural chemicals in it, and they also want to be able to manage their supply throughout the year, knowing that when there's a heavy rain, that actually the water table is going to be filtered at the right time. So bringing us together and saying the interventions that farmers can do that will help us have low carbon wheat might be slightly different interventions that a farmer would do to build flood resilience. Where the sweet spot is when we find similar interventions that we can both fund together to deliver the multiple outcomes. But the beauty of the approach really is it's not us saying to farmers, you must plant a cover crop and you must do this. We're saying, this is what we want in terms of an outcome, and then they say, I could do this and I could do that. And sometimes they're coming up with really amazing, innovative solutions that we haven't thought about. And we're not farmers. We don't know the land better than they know the land. And what we've seen as well is farmers are now looking over their neighbour's fence and they all want a piece of it. because there's also an additional financial benefit for them where they're getting paid for their flood resilience, for their less chemical use, for whatever it is, as well as the commodity that they're producing. So it's been fascinating. We are hopefully having some new partners join, and we've really championed this in East Anglia, but we're starting to do this all around the UK and in Italy and in Poland. So this model is going much wider.
Thanks, Emma. Anyone else? There was a question here first.
Everyone wants a drink, I think.
Product R&D. And so I think one of the things, we are sort of talking a lot about reporting-oriented challenges, and I think that's where a lot of companies come into this. But the goal is ultimately to make a better product, right? To have the Kit Kat be a lower environmental impact product, for example, or the tea, or the Yorkshire pudding. And so the question is, when you think about how the product R&D side of the business is going to drive change, I'd love to understand, maybe just how much collaboration there is between the two sides, and then also we're seeing some companies start to deploy the R&D budget to finance innovation in like materials, like alternative cotton variations or alternative sweeteners. Like, how much do you see that linking into the sustainability budget?
Sorry, got triggered. So my two last roles were actually combining sustainability and R&D, and which was amazing experience. But I think the 3 points to make here: one, I think the most powerful way of driving sustainability in the company is to make it intrinsic part of value creation, and almost ban a word investment in sustainability. It's a value creation. If you intertwine, if you fully fit it, or almost force it into a value creation of the business, that's the fastest way to get it. And there is almost no distinction. It should be for the better quality product, for the safer product, for the better profitability of the business. If you remove your carbon, you ultimately will get a more profitable business model. And the other point is about intelligence, data and intelligence. The brain of the consumer goods company is within PLM, product lifecycle management, which usually relates to R&D in one way or another. And actually, some of the data that comes from the space of environmental data, nutritional data, is so critical to design winning products for the future, but also create intelligence for the company and ultimately for the system. So ideally, we have, again, taking an example of tea previously, we have the Internet of Tea, which is the intelligence upstream, and we have IT, which is the intelligent blending tool. We just don't have proper carbon data. So through the solutions you will be developing in the future, if we can plug it in, that creates really a step change, an exponential progress by, one, integrating it fully with the business metrics, and two, automatizing the design program. And what I believe started in the 90s as design to value, and a lot of consulting companies actually had the fair share of profit from the design to value consultancy. I think the future will be design for impact. And this, again, where your data and the total value chain thinking will come in, and the whole operating model will translate ultimately for design for impact, which will be data driven. So.
Just to build on that, I think this is where the last two panels link, right? We talked so much about data, but data is only useful if it gives us information, and that information is only useful if it can be used to influence decisions and drive action. And sometimes even the data requests I get, I'm like, what are you going to do with that? And they're like, I don't know yet, but I think that's an important bit of data. But so we've had more data than we've ever had at this moment in time, and still we need more, and we need it better, and we need it faster, and we need it to more granularity. Really, we've got to look at what are the questions, what are the lines of inquiry that we're asking of that data, and then let's make the data we've got work really hard and figure out where those gaps are. And I think, to your point around it's about better products, absolutely, I need my Kit Kat designer, ingredient creators being able to see where that ingredient has come from, with a carbon value, with a biodiversity value, and then start making decisions on the Kit Kat of the future that is the most regenerative Kit Kat we've ever had. And then getting new data sources in from farmers that then keep allowing us to tweak that as we go. We're not there yet, but that's ultimately where we're trying to get to.
And then just to add to that, I think it's like the food teams owning this, right? Like the food teams. So we've got a healthy and sustainable diets lead now. We've got a business ownership model in place, and one of the heads of food in the business is leading healthy and sustainable diets. So she and Sophie and her team, they've got to understand this, and they've got to know and kind of drive the change. So that's what I'm investing quite a lot of my time at the moment, is partnering with Sophie, helping her to understand what the agenda is, and making sure that I'm setting up situations where her team can upskill, right? The food guys can upskill, because they're really keen, actually. The front line, I call them the front line team, they're really curious, they're really motivated, they want to do something, but they're like, I want to do it, but I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing, help me. So we've got a role at sustainability to help them to understand, right? So.